The sound of splintering bone echoed through the dusty alley, as Olivia Mason crumpled against the rough wooden wall of the livery, her strawberry blonde hair falling across her face as she tried to scramble away from the three men who had cornered her in the growing twilight of Jerome, Arizona, in 1887. The mining town, perched precariously on the side of Cleopatra Hill, had seen its share of violence since copper had been discovered in the Black Hills. But Olivia had never expected to find herself the target. She'd only been in Jerome for 3 weeks, having arrived on the stagecoach from Boston with hopes of starting anew as the town's schoolteacher. "Ain't so high and mighty now, are ye, Miss Teacher?" snarled Bert Hollies, the butcher's son, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey as he grabbed her wrist. His two companions, Elmer Ward and Frank Dixon, laughed cruelly as they closed in. "Please," Olivia begged, her green eyes wide with terror, "just let me go. I've done nothing to you." "Done plenty," Bert growled. "Comin' in here with your fancy Eastern ways, tellin' us how to talk proper and lookin' down your nose at honest folk." Olivia struggled against his grip, but the man's fingers only tightened, threatening to snap her delicate bones. She opened her mouth to scream, but Elmer's dirty hand clamped over it, the taste of dirt and tobacco making her gag. "Grab her legs," Bert ordered Frank, who grinned wickedly as he reached for her ankles. The sound of boots striking packed dirt made all three men turn. A tall figure stood at the entrance to the alley, silhouetted against the fading light of day. "Let her go," came a voice as hard and unforgiving as the Arizona terrain. "Mind your own business, Nathanson," Bert called out, not releasing his grip on Olivia. "This Eastern filly needs a lesson in Western hospitality." Owen Nathanson stepped forward, the last rays of sunlight catching the silver star pinned to his leather vest. He wasn't the town sheriff, just a cowboy who worked at the Lazy S Ranch outside of town, but in that moment, he carried the authority of law in his bearing. "I won't say it again," Owen warned, his voice dangerously soft. His hand hovered near the Colt .45 on his hip, but he didn't draw it. Bert shoved Olivia against the wall and turned to face Owen. 3 against 1, Nathanson. Bad odds, even for a man with your reputation. Owen didn't waste breath on further warnings. He moved with the startling speed of a rattlesnake strike, his fist connecting with Bert's jaw with a sickening crack. Before the butcher's son even hit the ground, Owen had pivoted toward Elmer, delivering an uppercut that sent the man reeling backward, blood spraying from his mouth. Frank released Olivia's ankles and reached for the knife at his belt, but Owen was ready. He caught Frank's wrist, twisting until the knife clattered to the dirt. A swift kick to the knees sent Frank sprawling, and when he tried to rise, Owen planted a boot firmly on his chest. "You broke my jaw." Bert wailed through a mouthful of blood, the words slurred and nearly unintelligible. "Elmer's too, from the sound of it," Owen replied calmly, not taking his eyes off Frank. "Now you three have a choice. You can drag yourselves to Doc Harper's office and explain how you got those injuries, or you can limp out of town tonight and never come back. Either way, if you ever touch Miss Mason again, breaking jaws will be the least of your concerns." The three men scrambled to their feet, Bert and Elmer clutching their faces as they staggered away, shooting venomous looks at Owen and Olivia. Only when they had disappeared around the corner did Owen turn to Olivia, who stood trembling against the livery wall, her simple blue dress torn at the shoulder, a bruise already forming on her cheek. "Are you hurt, Miss Mason?" he asked, his voice gentle now, all traces of the dangerous edge gone. Olivia began, but her legs suddenly gave way beneath her. Owen moved swiftly, catching her before she hit the ground. Without hesitation, he scooped her into his arms, cradling her against his chest as if she weighed nothing. "I've got you," he said softly. "You're safe now." Through a haze of shock and relief, Olivia looked up at her rescuer. She'd seen Owen Nathanson around town since her arrival, a quiet, solitary figure who rarely joined in the revelry at the Silver Dollar Saloon. He was older than her 22 years, perhaps 30, with eyes the color of a summer storm and a face weathered by sun and wind. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible even in the quiet alley. Owen nodded once, then began carrying her toward the main street. "I'll take you to Doc Harper." "No," Olivia said quickly. "Please, I don't want the whole town knowing. Just take me home." "My boarding house is on Cedar Street." Owen hesitated, clearly concerned about her injuries, but eventually nodded. "As you wish, Miss Mason." As he carried her through the darkening streets of Jerome, Olivia became intensely aware of the strong arms holding her, the steady beat of his heart against her side, and the scent of leather, sage, and open skies that clung to him. Despite the terror she'd just experienced, a strange warmth spread through her chest. She had no way of knowing that this violent encounter behind the livery would change both their lives forever. The widow Prescott's boarding house stood 3 stories tall, one of the few proper buildings in a town still dominated by tents and hastily constructed wooden structures. Owen carried Olivia up the steps and was met at the door by the landlady herself, a formidable woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Merciful heavens!" Mrs. Prescott exclaimed, taking in Olivia's disheveled appearance and the protective way Owen held her. "Bring her in at once, Mr. Nathanson." Owen hesitated at the threshold. "It might not be proper, madam. Propriety be damned when one of my girls is injured," Mrs. Prescott declared, ushering them into the parlor. "Set her down on the settee. I'll fetch water and bandages." As the landlady bustled away, Owen gently placed Olivia on the floral settee, stepping back as if suddenly aware of the intimacy of their contact. "The Holly's boy and his friends," Owen explained quietly, removing his hat. "They had her cornered behind Mackenzie's livery." Mrs. Prescott returned with a basin of water, clean cloths, and a bottle of witch hazel. "Those good-for-nothing scoundrels," she huffed, setting her supplies on a side table. "I've half a mind to march down to Sheriff Taylor's office myself." "Please don't," Olivia said, her voice stronger now. "I don't want to cause trouble." "Trouble's already been caused, dear," Mrs. Prescott replied, dabbing witch hazel on Olivia's bruised cheek, "and not by you." Owen shifted uncomfortably. "I should go." "You most certainly should not," Mrs. Prescott countered. "Not until you've had a cup of coffee and told me exactly what happened." She turned to Olivia. "Can you stand, dear? You should change out of that torn dress." With Mrs. Prescott's help, Olivia rose shakily to her feet. As she reached the stairs, she turned back to Owen. "Mr. Nathanson." "I don't know how to thank you." A hint of a smile softened his weather-beaten face. "No thanks needed, Miss Mason. Any man worth his salt would have done the same." "Perhaps," Mrs. Prescott said dryly, "but in my experience, men worth their salt are in short supply in mining towns." After Olivia had changed and cleaned up properly, she returned downstairs to find Owen still there, his large frame making Mrs. Prescott's delicate parlor furniture seem almost comically small. He stood immediately when she entered. "You're looking better," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I feel better," Olivia replied, though her wrist still ached where Bert had grabbed her. "Have you told Mrs. Prescott everything?" "He has," the landlady confirmed, her expression grim. "And while I respect your wish not to involve Sheriff Taylor, I cannot in good conscience allow those hooligans to terrorize a respectable young woman. Something must be done." "I've already taken care of Hollies and Ward," Owen said. "They won't be talking clearly for weeks, and I suspect they'll think twice before bothering any woman again." "Violence begets violence, Mr. Nathanson," Mrs. Prescott admonished, though there was a glint of approval in her eyes. "Sometimes it's the only language certain men understand," Owen replied unapologetically. He turned to Olivia. "Will you be teaching tomorrow?" The question caught her off guard. "Yes. The children shouldn't suffer because of what happened." Owen nodded, as if her answer confirmed something he'd already suspected about her character. "I'll escort you to the schoolhouse in the morning then." "That's not necessary, I insist," he said, the same quiet authority in his voice that had silenced the three attackers. 7 o'clock. Before Olivia could protest further, Mrs. Prescott interjected. "That would be most appreciated, Mr. Nathanson. I'll have coffee and biscuits ready when you arrive." With the matter apparently settled, Owen retrieved his hat from the side table. "Until tomorrow, then. Good evening, Mrs. Prescott, Miss Mason." After he had gone, Mrs. Prescott turned to Olivia with a knowing look. "That man rode 15 miles into town today to deliver a message to Mr. Garrett at the assay office. He was on his way back to the Lazy S when he heard your struggle." "How do you know that?" Olivia asked. "Jerome may be growing, my dear, but it's still a small enough town for news to travel quickly." Mrs. Prescott patted Olivia's hand. "Owen Nathanson is not a man who involves himself in others' affairs. That he intervened on your behalf and broke 2 jaws in the process speaks volumes." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. He was simply being gallant. "Perhaps," Mrs. Prescott said with a smile. "Now come have some soup. You've had quite an ordeal." That night, Olivia lay awake in her narrow bed, replaying the events behind the livery. Each time she closed her eyes, she felt Bert's hands on her wrists, smelled the stench of whiskey and unwashed bodies. But then, Owen would appear in her mind tall and steady, his voice cutting through her fear like a knife through butter. She had never been carried before, not since she was a small child. The memory of being held against Owen's chest, feeling completely secure despite the violence that had just occurred, sent a strange flutter through her stomach. It was improper to think of a man she barely knew in such a way, but Olivia couldn't help herself. Eventually, she drifted into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of storm-gray eyes and gentle hands that had shown such startling violence in her defense. True to his word, Owen arrived at the boarding house precisely at 7 the next morning. He had clearly made an effort with his appearance. His dark hair was neatly combed, his shirt was crisp, and his boots were polished to a shine. The only thing that remained unchanged was the Colt .45 on his hip, a necessary accessory in the still wild territory. Mrs. Prescott fussed over both of them, loading Owen with biscuits and coffee, while peppering him with questions about the Lazy S Ranch and its owner, Silas Jameson, one of the territory's wealthiest cattle barons. "Mr. Jameson's got 5,000 head of cattle and is looking to expand," Owen explained patiently. "That's why I'm in town so often lately. He's negotiating to buy the Thompson place." "All the way on the other side of town?" Mrs. Prescott asked. "That's quite a distance to add to his holdings." "Water rights," Owen said simply. "Thompson's land has 3 natural springs that run year-round." Olivia listened with interest. She knew little about ranching, having grown up in Boston where her father had been a professor of literature at Harvard. Her move to Arizona Territory had been born of necessity after both her parents died of influenza within months of each other, leaving her with little money and few prospects. "We should go," she said, noting the time on the grandfather clock in the corner. "The children will be arriving soon." Owen nodded, thanking Mrs. Prescott for her hospitality before offering Olivia his arm. The gesture was so formal, so at odds with the violence he had displayed the previous evening, that she couldn't help but smile as she placed her hand in the crook of his elbow. The walk to the schoolhouse took them through the heart of Jerome, past the mercantile, the assayer's office, and the Silver Dollar Saloon, which was mercifully quiet at that early hour. People nodded respectfully to Owen as they passed, a few casting curious glances at Olivia on his arm. Word of the incident had clearly spread, though no one mentioned it directly. "I hope this isn't causing you embarrassment," Olivia said quietly as they passed a group of miners heading to the United Verd mine for the day shift. "What would embarrass me?" Owen asked, genuinely puzzled. "Being seen escorting the schoolteacher who was attacked behind the livery. People talk in small towns." Owen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Let them talk. The only ones who should be embarrassed are those three cowards." After a pause, he added more gently, "And you have nothing to be embarrassed about either, Miss Mason. You did nothing wrong." They reached the schoolhouse, a simple one-room building on the outskirts of town. Already, several children were playing in the yard, supervised by a Native American woman Olivia had come to know as Maria, who helped maintain the school and sometimes assisted with the younger children. "Will you be all right now?" Owen asked, releasing her arm reluctantly. "Yes, thank you. The children's parents will be arriving with the younger ones soon." Olivia hesitated, then added, "Will you? That is, do you plan to escort me home as well?" A slow smile spread across Owen's face, transforming his serious expression into something that made Olivia's heart skip a beat. "If you'll allow it, Miss Mason, I'd consider it a privilege." "I would like that," she admitted. "And please call me Olivia." "Olivia," he repeated, as if testing how the name felt on his tongue. "Then you must call me Owen." With a tip of his hat, he turned and walked away, leaving Olivia to watch his retreating figure until little Sarah Thompson tugged at her skirt, bringing her attention back to the schoolyard and the day ahead. The morning passed in a blur of reading lessons and arithmetic, but Olivia found her thoughts continually drifting to Owen. She had noticed him around town before. Of course, a man of his stature was difficult to miss, but she had never really looked at him until he appeared in that alley like an avenging angel. At lunch, while the children ate their food in the schoolyard, Maria approached Olivia at her desk. "The cowboy who broke Bert Hollis's jaw," Maria said without preamble. "He is a good man." Olivia looked up in surprise. "You know about that?" Maria nodded, her dark eyes serious. "Everyone knows. The doctors set their jaws this morning. They told Sheriff Taylor they fell down drunk, but no one believes it." She smiled slightly. "Two men with the exact same injury on the same night. Do people know why he did it?" Olivia asked, suddenly fearful that her reputation might be compromised. "They know Nathanson stopped those three from hurting you," Maria said simply. "In Jerome, that makes him a hero and you a lady who needed protection. Nothing shameful in that." Relieved, Olivia returned to grading spelling tests, but Maria remained by her desk. "Nathanson does not fight without reason," she continued. "My husband works at the Lazy S. He says in 5 years, he has never seen Nathanson raise his hand in anger, even when provoked. The ranch hands respect him because he is fair and strong, but not cruel like some bosses." "Why are you telling me this?" Olivia asked. Maria smiled knowingly. "Because I saw how you looked at him this morning and how he looked at you. It is good to know the character of a man before your heart decides." Before Olivia could respond, the children began filing back into the classroom, ending the conversation but leaving Olivia with much to consider. True to his word, Owen appeared at the schoolhouse at 3 o'clock, just as Olivia was dismissing the children for the day. She felt a flutter in her chest when she saw him waiting patiently by the gate, nodding politely to the parents who came to collect their children. "Mr. Nathanson," little Sarah Thompson exclaimed, running up to him. "Did you really break two men's faces, Sarah?" her mother scolded, mortified. Owen crouched down to the child's level. "Now, who's been telling tales?" "Everyone's talking about it," Sarah said matter-of-factly. "Papa says you're a hero because you saved Miss Mason from bad men." Owen's eyes found Olivia's over the child's head. "I just happened to be in the right place at the right time," he said modestly. "Well, we're grateful for that," Mrs. Thompson said, taking Sarah's hand. "Come along, Sarah. Let's leave Miss Mason and Mr. Nathanson to their walk." As the schoolyard emptied, Owen approached Olivia, who was locking the schoolhouse door. "I see my reputation precedes me," he said ruefully. "According to Maria, it's a good reputation to have," Olivia replied, falling into step beside him as they headed back toward town. "She says her husband works at the Lazy S. Miguel," Owen nodded. "One of our best hands with the horses." They walked in companionable silence for a while, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the dusty street. It was a comfortable silence, not awkward as it might have been between two people who barely knew each other. "May I ask you something?" Olivia ventured eventually. "Of course." "Why did you come to my aid last night? You didn't know me, not really." Owen considered the question seriously before answering. "I was raised to believe that a man protects those who can't protect themselves. It's that simple." "Is it? Maria says you've never been in a fight before, not in all the years you've worked at the Lazy S." "Fighting's a last resort," Owen replied. "But what those men were planning—" His jaw tightened. "There are lines that shouldn't be crossed." They had reached the main street of Jerome now, and Owen guided her toward the Silver Star Cafe rather than continuing to the boarding house. "I thought you might like some tea before returning to Mrs. Prescott's," he explained at her questioning look. "The cafe has a new shipment of Earl Grey from San Francisco." The gesture was so thoughtful that Olivia couldn't refuse, even though she knew accepting might fuel town gossip. Inside, the cafe was quiet, with only a few tables occupied by miners between shifts and a couple of respectable-looking women Olivia recognized from Sunday services. As they settled at a table by the window, Owen asked, "How was your day? Did any of the children mention what happened?" "Only Sarah, as you heard," Olivia said with a small smile. "Children are remarkably resilient. They're more interested in their spelling tests than town scandals." "It's not a scandal," Owen said firmly. "You did nothing wrong." In Boston, a young, unmarried woman being attacked behind a livery stable would be quite the scandal, regardless of culpability, Olivia said wryly. "Well, this isn't Boston," Owen replied. "Out here, people judge you by your actions and your character, not by circumstances beyond your control." As they sipped their tea Earl Grey for Olivia and strong black coffee for Owen, they began to share pieces of their lives. Olivia told him about growing up in Boston, about losing her parents and making the decision to come west. "Teaching positions are scarce back east without connections," she explained. "But out here, any woman with a decent education can find work. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Jerome, it seemed like Providence. Even after last night, you don't regret coming?" Owen asked, his gray eyes serious. Olivia considered the question. "No," she said finally. "There are dangers everywhere, Mr. Nathan Owen. At least here, there are also people willing to step in and help a stranger." Owen's smile made her heart beat a little faster. "I'm glad to hear it. Jerome would be poorer without you." By the time they finished their refreshments, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the town. Owen insisted on walking Olivia back to the boarding house, even though it was only a short distance from the cafe. At the door, He removed his hat, holding it respectfully in his hands. "I have to return to the ranch tonight, but I'll be back in town on Saturday. Would you allow me to call on you properly then? Perhaps we could attend the social at the church together." Olivia was surprised by how much she wanted to say yes. 2 days ago, Owen Nathanson had been just another face in town. Now she couldn't imagine not seeing him again. "I would like that very much," she said. Owen's smile was like the sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Until Saturday, then." As Olivia watched him walk away, Mrs. Prescott appeared beside her in the doorway. "A fine man," the landlady observed, "and if I'm not mistaken, quite taken with our new schoolteacher." Olivia blushed. "We've only just become acquainted." "Some things don't require time, my dear Mrs. Prescott said sagely. "Only the right circumstances to reveal what's already there." The next 3 days passed with agonizing slowness for Olivia. She threw herself into her teaching, introducing her students to Shakespeare's sonnets and organizing a spelling bee for Friday afternoon. All the while, thoughts of Owen lingered at the edges of her mind. She had not been courted much in Boston. Between caring for her ailing parents and her studies, there had been little time for social engagements. The few suitors who had shown interest had been quickly discouraged by her father's academic scrutiny or put off by the family's modest circumstances. Owen was different from those Boston gentlemen with their polished manners and literary quotes. There was something fundamentally solid about him, as if he were anchored to the earth in a way those Eastern men had never been. On Friday evening, as she was helping Mrs. Prescott prepare dinner, there was a knock at the door. Wiping her hands on her apron, the landlady went to answer it, returning moments later with a package wrapped in brown paper. "For you," she said, handing it to Olivia with a knowing smile. Inside the package was a book, a collection of poems by Alfred, Lord Tennyson, and a simple note. "I thought you might enjoy this. The bookseller at Hammond's Mercantile said it just arrived from San Francisco. Until tomorrow, Owen." Olivia ran her fingers over the embossed leather cover, deeply touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Owen had paid attention when she mentioned her love of poetry during their conversation at the cafe. "That man is certainly making his intentions clear," Mrs. Prescott remarked, peering over Olivia's shoulder at the book, "and quite romantically, too." Olivia clutched the book to her chest, a warm glow spreading through her. "It's just a friendly gesture." "Of course," Mrs. Prescott agreed, though her tone suggested she believed nothing of the sort. "Now come help me with these potatoes." Nothing improves a woman's complexion like kitchen steam before a social engagement. Saturday dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect autumn day that made the harsh Arizona landscape seem almost benevolent. Olivia spent longer than usual on her appearance, finally settling on her best dress, a deep blue cotton with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. It was not as fashionable as what ladies wore in Boston, but it was clean, well made, and brought out the color of her eyes. Mrs. Prescott approved heartily. "Simple elegance suits you, my dear, and that shade of blue is most becoming." By the time the grandfather clock in the parlor struck 4, Olivia's nerves were stretched taut as fiddle strings. When the knock finally came at the door, she had to force herself to walk, not run, to answer it. Owen stood on the porch, hat in hand, dressed in clean denims, a white shirt, and a dark vest that accentuated the breadth of his shoulders. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he had clearly visited the barber, as his usual stubble was gone, revealing a strong jawline. "Miss Mason," he said, his eyes warming as they took her in. "You look lovely." "Thank you," Olivia replied, suddenly shy. "And thank you for the book. It was very thoughtful." "I'm glad you liked it," Owen said, offering his arm. "Shall we?" The social starts at 4:30, and Mrs. Thornton is very particular about punctuality. The church social was held in the community hall adjacent to the small wooden church. By the time they arrived, the hall was already filling with Jerome's residents, miners and their families, shopkeepers, ranchers from the surrounding area, and even a few of the more respectable girls from the Silver Dollar Saloon, who were welcomed by the pragmatic minister's wife, despite raised eyebrows from some of the town's matrons. Their entrance together caused a brief lull in conversation, followed by a buzz of whispers. Olivia felt her cheeks grow warm, but Owen seemed unperturbed by the attention. He guided her toward the refreshment table, where Mrs. Thornton, the minister's wife, was serving lemonade and cake. "Mr. Nathanson," Mrs. Thornton greeted them with a warm smile. "How lovely to see you at one of our socials at last. And Miss Mason, you're looking well. I heard about your ordeal, dreadful business." "Thank you, Mrs. Thornton," Olivia said, accepting a cup of lemonade. "But I'm quite recovered, thanks to Mr. Nathanson's timely intervention." "Indeed," the older woman said approvingly. "Providence works in mysterious ways, bringing the right people together at the right moment." As they moved away from the refreshment table, Olivia noticed 3 men entering the hall. Her heart stuttered when she recognized Frank Dixon, the only one of her attackers whose jaw remained intact. He spotted her immediately, his face darkening with malice. Owen followed her gaze and stiffened beside her. "I didn't expect him to show his face in public so soon." "It's all right," Olivia said, though her hand trembled slightly on Owen's arm. "He can't do anything here with so many people around." "No," Owen agreed, his voice hard, "he can't." Throughout the evening, Olivia was aware of Frank watching them, his eyes following their movements as they mingled with other guests. But with Owen at her side, she found she could push aside her fear and enjoy the social. Owen introduced her to ranchers and their wives, many of whom had children in her class, and she was touched by how many people expressed concern for her welfare. "You're well liked in town," Owen observed as they took a turn around the dance floor during a sedate waltz. His hand at her waist was respectful but firm, and he moved with surprising grace for such a tall man. "I'm still new here," Olivia replied, "but the people have been welcoming, except for—" "Don't think about them," Owen said, his eyes holding hers. "Tonight is for pleasant thoughts only." And it was pleasant more than pleasant. As the evening progressed, Olivia found herself laughing more than she had in years. Owen had a dry wit that surprised her, and he listened intently when she spoke, as if her words mattered deeply to him. By the time they left the social, the stars were out in full force, a dazzling canopy above the small town. Owen suggested they take a slight detour on their way back to the boarding house, leading her to a small rise just at the edge of town. "The view from here is worth the extra walk," he explained. He was right. From their vantage point, they could see the entire town spread below them, lamplight glowing in windows, the distant sound of a piano drifting up from the saloon. Beyond the town lay the vast darkness of the valley, and in the distance, the silhouette of mountains against the star-filled sky. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed. "This is why I stay," Owen said quietly. "The territory is harsh and often cruel, but there's a raw beauty here you won't find anywhere else." "I think I'm beginning to understand that," Olivia replied, looking up at him. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, Owen leaned down. His lips met hers in a gentle kiss that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. It was a chaste kiss by most standards, but to Olivia, who had never been kissed before, it was transformative. When they parted, Owen's eyes searched hers. "I hope I haven't overstepped." "No," Olivia said softly. You haven't." They stood together a moment longer, Owen's arm around her shoulders, looking out over Jerome. In that moment, Olivia felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced since before her parents' deaths. It was as if all the pieces of her life, scattered by grief and uncertainty, were finally beginning to come together again. The walk back to the boarding house was filled with a comfortable silence, both of them processing the significance of what had just transpired. At the door, Owen took her hand in his. "I have to return to the ranch tomorrow," he said, "but I'll be in town again on Tuesday. May I call on you then?" "Yes," Olivia replied without hesitation. "I'd like that very much." With a smile that made her heart flutter, Owen brushed his lips against her hand. "Good night, Olivia." "Good night, Owen." As she prepared for bed that night, Olivia felt as if she were floating. She had come to Jerome hoping for a fresh start, never imagining that an attack behind Mackenzie's livery would lead her to a man like Owen Nathanson. But her peace was shattered the next morning when she came downstairs to find Sheriff Taylor waiting in Mrs. Prescott's parlor, his expression grave. "Miss Mason," he said, standing as she entered, "I'm afraid I have some disturbing news. Frank Dixon has filed a complaint against Mr. Nathanson, claiming assault without provocation. He's demanding Mr. Nathanson's arrest." The world seemed to tilt beneath Olivia's feet. "That's absurd." "Owen was defending me from Dixon and his friends. They attacked me behind the livery." "That's not how Dixon tells it," Sheriff Taylor said grimly. "According to him, you and Nathanson had a prior arrangement to meet behind the livery, but when Hollies, Ward, and Dixon happened upon you, Nathanson attacked them in a jealous rage." "That's a lie," Olivia exclaimed, her face flushing with anger. "Why would anyone believe such a thing?" "People believe what aligns with their prejudices, my dear," Mrs. Prescott said, entering the parlor with a tray of coffee. "And unfortunately, there are those in town who find it easier to believe ill of a young, unmarried woman than to accept that 3 respectable men could behave so deplorably." Sheriff Taylor had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I don't believe Dixon's version, Miss Mason, but I have to investigate the complaint. Can you tell me exactly what happened that evening?" Steeling herself, Olivia recounted the attack in detail, how she had been returning from delivering schoolwork to a sick student when the 3 men cornered her, how they had dragged her behind the livery, and how Owen had intervened, breaking 2 jaws in the process. "And you're willing to testify to this in front of Judge Parker when he comes through next month?" Sheriff Taylor asked. "I am," Olivia said firmly. "Owen Nathanson saved me from what would have been a terrible assault. I won't let him be punished for it." The sheriff nodded, satisfied. "That's all I needed to hear. I'll go out to the Lazy S today and get Nathanson's statement, then we'll see what Judge Parker makes of it when he arrives." After the sheriff left, Mrs. Prescott put a comforting arm around Olivia's shoulders. "Don't worry, my dear. The truth has a way of coming out, especially in a town as small as Jerome." But Olivia couldn't shake her unease. She had seen the malevolent look in Frank Dixon's eyes at the social. This wasn't just about avoiding responsibility for the attack, this was revenge, pure and simple, aimed at both her and Owen. The week that followed was one of the most difficult of Olivia's life. Word of Frank Dixon's accusations spread through town like wildfire, and though many people stood by her, there were whispers and sideways glances that made her daily walk to the schoolhouse an exercise in dignity. Some parents kept their children home, uncomfortable with the idea of an allegedly loose woman teaching their offspring. Others made a point of expressing their support, like Mrs. Thompson, who arrived at the schoolhouse with a basket of fresh baked bread to sustain you through these trying times. Through it all, Olivia maintained her composure, teaching her remaining students with the same dedication as before. But inside, she worried constantly about Owen and what Dixon's lies might mean for him. On Tuesday afternoon, as she was dismissing the children, she looked up to see Owen waiting at the schoolyard gate, just as he had the week before. The sight of him solid and reassuring brought tears to her eyes. "You're here," she said as she approached him, not caring who might be watching. "Of course I'm here," Owen replied, his eyes soft with concern. "Sheriff Taylor told me what Dixon's been saying. I came as soon as I could." They walked together toward the boarding house, Owen's steady presence beside her a balm to her frayed nerves. "How bad has it been?" he asked quietly. "Not as bad as it could be," Olivia admitted. "Most people don't believe Dixon's version, but there are always those who prefer scandal to truth." "Dixon's father is on the town council," Owen said grimly. "He's been trying to pressure Sheriff Taylor to arrest me before Judge Parker arrives." Olivia's step faltered. "Can he do that?" "No," Owen assured her. "Taylor's a good man. He won't be bullied, not even by Councilman Dixon. But it does mean we need to be prepared for a fight when the judge gets here." At the boarding house, Mrs. Prescott welcomed Owen warmly, ushering them into the parlor where tea was already laid out. The landlady had become one of their staunchest allies, defending Olivia's reputation to anyone who would listen, and making it clear that Owen was welcome in her home at any time. "I've had an idea," Owen said after they were settled with their tea. "I spoke with Silas Jameson about the situation, and he's offered to help." "The ranch owner?" Olivia asked, surprised. "How could he help?" "Jameson has influence in the territory. He suggested bringing in a lawyer from Prescott to represent us at the hearing. And he's also offered you a position as tutor to his children if things don't go well here in Jerome." The implication was clear. If the scandal affected her ability to continue as the town's schoolteacher, she would have somewhere to go. The offer was generous and clearly meant to provide reassurance, but it also highlighted the precariousness of her situation. "That's very kind of Mr. Jameson," Olivia said carefully, "but I hope it won't come to that. I've grown quite fond of Jerome despite recent events." Owen reached across the small table to take her hand. "So have I, especially recently." The warmth in his gray eyes made her heart skip. Whatever happened with Frank Dixon and his false accusations? Olivia knew one thing with certainty: her feelings for Owen Nathanson were real and growing stronger by the day. As the date of Judge Parker's arrival approached, tensions in Jerome escalated. Frank Dixon, emboldened by his father's support, had taken to making veiled threats whenever he encountered Olivia in town. Owen, concerned for her safety, arranged with several of the Lazy S Ranch hands to take turns escorting her to and from the schoolhouse when he couldn't be there himself. The situation came to a head one evening in early October, just days before the judge was due to arrive. Olivia was working late at the schoolhouse, preparing lessons for the following week, when she heard the door open behind her. "Forgotten something?" she asked, assuming it was Maria, who had left only moments before. "Yeah," came Frank Dixon's slurred voice. "I forgot to finish what we started behind the livery." Olivia's blood ran cold as she turned to see Dixon standing in the doorway, clearly drunk and blocking her only exit. The look in his eyes left no doubt about his intentions. "Mr. Dixon," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady, "I think you should leave. Sheriff Taylor wouldn't look kindly on you threatening me again." Dixon laughed, an ugly sound that echoed in the empty schoolroom. "Sheriff's out at the Wilson place. Won't be back till morning, and your cowboy's out at the ranch." He took a step closer. "No one to save you this time, teacher." Olivia backed away, her mind racing. The windows were too small for her to climb through, and Dixon stood between her and the only door. Her gaze fell on the heavy brass bell she used to summon children in from the schoolyard, if she could reach it. "You know," Dixon continued, advancing slowly, "my jaw still aches when it rains. Seems only fair that Nathanson should suffer too, and what better way than to take what he values most?" In one swift movement, Olivia grabbed the bell and swung it with all her might. It caught Dixon on the side of the head with a dull thud, causing him to stagger sideways. Not waiting to see if he recovered, Olivia darted past him and out the door. The streets of Jerome were dark, with only a few lanterns illuminating the main thoroughfare. Olivia ran blindly, her heart pounding in her ears. Behind her, she could hear Dixon's cursing as he recovered from the blow and gave chase. She headed instinctively toward the center of town, where there would be people even at this hour. But Dixon was faster, and she could hear his footsteps gaining on her. Just as his hand grasped the back of her dress, a shot rang out, the sound echoing off the buildings. "That's far enough, Dixon." Olivia nearly collapsed with relief at the sound of Owen's voice. He stood a few yards away, his Colt .45 raised, the barrel still smoking from the warning shot he had fired into the air. Dixon released her immediately, raising his hands. "This ain't your business, Nathanson." "Anything involving Miss Mason is my business," Owen replied coldly, moving forward until he stood between Olivia and her attacker. "And attacking a woman is every decent man's business." By now, the commotion had drawn attention. Doors opened along the street as curious residents peered out to see what was happening. Among them was Deputy Collins, who hurried over when he saw the confrontation. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "Dixon was attacking Miss Mason," Owen explained, not lowering his gun. "I interrupted him." "She hit me with a bell," Dixon protested, touching the growing lump on his temple. "I was just trying to talk to her about dropping the charges." "By chasing her through the streets at night." Owen's voice was dangerously quiet. "You're a liar, Dixon, and everyone here knows it." More townspeople had gathered now, drawn by the shot and the raised voices. Among them was Councilman Dixon, who pushed his way to the front of the crowd. "What's my son supposed to have done now?" he demanded. "Your son," said Mrs. Thompson, who had emerged from the millinery shop, was chasing Miss Mason like a predator after prey. "I saw it all from my window." Others murmured agreement, and for the first time, Olivia saw uncertainty cross Councilman Dixon's face. "Deputy," Owen said, finally lowering his weapon, "I think Sheriff Taylor would want Frank Dixon locked up until he returns, don't you?" Deputy Collins nodded grimly. "Come along, Dixon. You can explain yourself to the sheriff in the morning." As the deputy led a protesting Frank away, Councilman Dixon turned to the crowd. "This proves nothing. We'll see what Judge Parker has to say when he hears all the evidence." But there was less conviction in his voice now, and several townspeople turned their backs on him as he spoke, a clear sign that public opinion was shifting. Owen immediately went to Olivia, who was trembling with the aftermath of fear and adrenaline. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. "No," she managed, her voice muffled against his chest. "Just shaken." "I've got you," Owen assured her, echoing the words he had spoken that first night behind the livery. "You're safe now." And despite everything, Olivia believed him. In Owen's arms, she felt a sense of security that went beyond the physical protection he offered. It was the certainty that no matter what happened with Frank Dixon or the town's gossips, she was no longer facing the world alone. Mrs. Prescott bustled up, clucking with concern. "Bring her to the boarding house immediately, Mr. Nathanson. She needs tea and perhaps a drop of brandy after such a fright." As they walked back to the boarding house, surrounded by concerned townspeople offering support and outrage on Olivia's behalf. She realized that Jerome had become more than just a place of employment for her. Somehow, despite the challenges, it had become home. Judge Isaac Parker arrived in Jerome 2 days later, a formidable figure known throughout the territory for his firm but fair administration of justice. The hearing was set for the following morning in the town hall, which had been hastily arranged to serve as a courtroom. The night before, Olivia sat with Owen on the porch of the boarding house, both of them too anxious about the next day to remain indoors. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Owen said, his voice low, "I want you to know that meeting you has changed my life, Olivia." She turned to look at him, his face half illuminated by the lamplight from the parlor window. "Mine too," she admitted, "though I wish it had been under different circumstances." Owen smiled ruefully. "So do I, but I can't regret being the one to find you that night." He hesitated, then took her hand in his. "I've been thinking about the future, about what I want and where I'm heading. For years, I've been content to work for others, saving my wages but never quite sure what I was saving for." "And now?" Olivia asked, her heart beating faster. "Now I know," Owen said simply. "I want a home, land of my own, and I hope." He took a deep breath. "I want to court you properly, Olivia, if you'll allow it. Not because of what happened or out of some sense of obligation, but because in these few weeks I've come to care for you more than I thought possible." Joy blossomed in Olivia's chest, bright and unexpected. "I would like that very much, Owen." His smile in that moment was worth all the trouble and scandal they had endured. He leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle promise of things to come. The hearing the next morning was well attended, with what seemed like half the town squeezing into the hall to witness the proceedings. Judge Parker, a thin man with penetrating eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, called the room to order with a sharp rap of his gavel. "We're here to determine the facts in a most unsavory case," he announced. "Frank Dixon has accused Owen Nathanson of assault without provocation, while Mr. Nathanson claims he was defending Miss Olivia Mason from attack. I intend to get to the bottom of this today." For the next 3 hours, Judge Parker heard testimony from all involved parties. Frank Dixon, his face still bearing the bruise from the school bell, maintained that Olivia had arranged to meet Owen behind the livery, and that he and his friends had simply been passing by when Owen attacked them in a jealous rage. Bert Hollies and Elmer Ward, their jaws still wired shut, could only mumble their agreement, which the judge seemed to find suspicious in itself. When it was Olivia's turn to testify, she stood tall despite her nervousness, recounting the events exactly as they had occurred. Several women in the audience nodded in support as she described the terror of being cornered by 3 men with clear ill intent. Owen's testimony was straightforward and matched Olivia's in all respects. When Councilman Dixon attempted to question his character, several ranch hands from the Lazy S stood up to vouch for Owen's integrity, as did Maria's husband Miguel and even Mrs. Prescott. The turning point came when Dr. Harper was called to testify about the injuries sustained by Hollies and Ward. "In my professional opinion," the doctor said, adjusting his spectacles, "the injuries to both men were consistent with powerful blows delivered in rapid succession by someone facing them directly. If Mr. Nathanson had attacked them from behind in a surprise assault, as they claim, the fracture patterns would have been different." After all the testimony had been heard, Judge Parker retired to the sheriff's office to consider his verdict. The crowd waited anxiously, no one leaving despite the cramped conditions and the heat of the day. When the judge returned an hour later, the room fell silent. "Having heard all the evidence," Judge Parker announced, I find that Frank Dixon's accusation against Owen Nathanson is without merit. Mr. Nathanson acted in defense of a woman being attacked, which is not only legal but commendable. The complaint is dismissed. A cheer went up from many in the audience, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. Furthermore, he continued, based on the testimony regarding Mr. Dixon's subsequent attack on Miss Mason at the schoolhouse, I am charging him with assault and attempted abduction. Mr. Dixon will be transported to Prescott to await trial on these charges. Frank Dixon's face contorted with rage. This is a sham. She's nothing but enough. Judge Parker's voice cracked like a whip. One more word and I'll add contempt of court to the charges. He turned to Sheriff Taylor. Take him away. As Frank was led out, Councilman Dixon approached the judge's table, his earlier arrogance replaced by a father's concern. Your Honor, surely there's some arrangement we can come to. My son is young, impetuous. Your son is a danger to women, Judge Parker replied coldly. And your attempts to use your position to shield him from consequences have only enabled his behavior. I suggest you reflect on that, Councilman. With a final rap of his gavel, Judge Parker concluded the hearing. People immediately surrounded Olivia and Owen, offering congratulations and support. The ordeal that had begun behind the livery was finally over. That evening, the town held an impromptu celebration at the Silver Star Cafe. It wasn't just for the verdict, though that was the ostensible reason. It was also, Olivia realized, a way for the town to make amends for those who had doubted her, for the whispers and sidelong glances of the past weeks. Even Mayor Prescott, who had remained notably silent during the controversy, made a point of publicly thanking Olivia for her dedication to the town's children, and assuring her that her position as schoolteacher was secure for as long as she wished to remain in Jerome. As the celebration wound down, Owen drew Olivia outside where the stars were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. There's something I need to ask you, he said, his expression uncharacteristically nervous. Olivia's heart quickened. Yes. Silas Jameson has offered to sell me a portion of the Thompson land, 100 acres with one of the springs. It's good land, enough to start a small ranch of my own. Owen, that's wonderful, Olivia exclaimed. You've worked so hard for this. It would mean staying in Jerome, Owen continued, watching her carefully. Building a life here. I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be, Olivia said softly. Owen took both her hands in his. I know it's too soon by most standards, but what we've been through together. It's shown me what kind of woman you are, Olivia. Brave, compassionate, resilient. He took a deep breath. I love you, and if you'll have me, I want to build that life with you. Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes, but they were tears of joy. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I am, Owen said, a smile spreading across his face. Olivia Mason, will you marry me? Yes, she answered without hesitation. Yes, I will. Owen gathered her into his arms, lifting her off her feet as he kissed her, both of them laughing with the sheer joy of the moment. When he set her down, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver ring set with a single pearl. It was my mother's, he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. She made me promise I'd only give it to someone I loved with my whole heart. Olivia looked down at the ring, then back up at Owen, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. It's perfect. They were married 2 months later in the small church in Jerome with nearly the entire town in attendance. Mrs. Prescott insisted on hosting the reception at the boarding house, transforming the usually staid parlor into a festive space filled with flowers and music. Silas Jameson presented them with a pair of fine horses as a wedding gift, while the townspeople collectively gave them a handmade quilt, each square stitched by a different family. Even Sheriff Taylor contributed, gifting Owen a fine Winchester rifle for protection on your new homestead. As the celebration continued around them, Owen led Olivia out onto the porch for a moment of quiet. "Happy, Mrs. Nathanson?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely," she answered, leaning against him. "Though I still can't quite believe how we came to be here." "It's not the usual way of things," Owen admitted with a chuckle. "Most couples don't begin with broken jaws and court hearings." "No," Olivia agreed, "but then we're not most couples." In the months and years that followed, Owen and Olivia built their home on the land purchased from Jameson. It wasn't easy. The Arizona territory was unforgiving, with drought, harsh winters, and occasional tensions with nearby Apache bands. But they faced each challenge together, their bond strengthened by the unusual circumstances of their meeting. Owen's small ranch, which they named Nuevo Comienzo, New Beginning, gradually grew as he applied the knowledge gained from years of working for Jameson. By their third anniversary, they had a modest but thriving operation, with 50 head of cattle, a small apple orchard, and a vegetable garden that was the envy of neighboring ranchers' wives. Olivia continued teaching at the Jerome schoolhouse for 2 more years, until the birth of their first child, a son they named James after Owen's father. A daughter, Eleanor, followed 2 years later, and then another son, William, the year after that. By 1895, Jerome had grown into a bustling mining town, with new copper discoveries bringing prosperity and growth. Frank Dixon had served his time in Yuma Territorial Prison and wisely chosen not to return to Jerome upon his release. Councilman Dixon had lost his position on the town council in the election following the scandal and had eventually moved to Tucson, his influence in Jerome a thing of the past. On the 10th anniversary of the night behind the livery, Owen and Olivia returned to the spot where they had first met. The old wooden structure had been replaced by a brick building, and the alley was now properly paved, but the memories remained vivid. "I was so terrified that night," Olivia recalled, her hand in Owen's as they stood in the place where their lives had intersected so dramatically. "I never imagined it would lead to all this." Owen squeezed her hand gently. "I was just riding back to the ranch, thinking about nothing in particular when I heard the struggle, if I'd been a few minutes earlier or later." "But you weren't," Olivia said firmly. "You were exactly where you needed to be when you needed to be there." Owen smiled down at his wife, the love of 10 years evident in his eyes. "As were you, Olivia. As were you." They left the alley and walked arm in arm through the streets of Jerome, nodding to familiar faces along the way. At the edge of town, their 3 children waited with Mrs. Prescott, who, despite her advancing years, remained as sharp and formidable as ever. "Did you see the ghost of the livery?" 8-year-old James asked eagerly when they approached. He had recently developed a fascination with the supernatural, much to his mother's amusement and slight concern. "No ghosts," Owen replied, ruffling his son's hair. "Just memories." "Good ones?" asked 6-year-old Eleanor, always perceptive beyond her years. Olivia exchanged a look with Owen, communicating a decade's worth of love and shared experiences in a single glance. "The very best," she assured her daughter. "The beginning of everything good in our lives." As they loaded their children into the wagon for the journey back to Nuevo Comienzo, Olivia reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. She had come to Jerome seeking only employment and independence after the loss of her parents. Instead, she had found love, family, and a sense of belonging she had never thought possible. 3 men had held her down behind the livery, but the cowboy who broke 2 jaws and carried her away had also carried her into a future brighter than any she could have imagined for herself. and for that, she would be forever grateful.